In my last video, I lay the groundwork covering the origins of the creation of One Punch Man across the webcomic, manga, and anime. Because in this video, I want to dive into something thicker. The three very different groups of One Punch Man fans, each with their own understandable reasons for why they think the series has gone off track. My goal isn't to pick sides here, because genuinely I sympathize with everyone here. It's to separate the reasonable from the unreasonable, and hopefully find where the story could improve if we look at it from all angles. This video is part of a bigger series I'm working on, so if that interests you, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next and final chapter. Fall. When a story rises as quickly as One Punch Man did, it's almost inevitable that expectations will eventually outpace the reality. Think of Attack on Titan or Tokyo Ghoul. Shows that either had no time or took too long, respectively upsetting their fans, who want a loyal adaptation of their story in a timely manner. In One Punch Man's case, what began as a quirky frustration of shonen stories taken webcomic form evolved into a blockbuster manga and then a world-spanning anime. But just as fast as the series climbed, cracks began to show. The fall wasn't immediate, it was slow, and different groups of fans noticed it in very different ways. There was not just one reason or fault, it was because of many reasons from all three sources of the story. We must trace the key factors behind this decline. The poor reception of season 2, the slow pace and redraws of the manga, the tonal shift away from the webcomic, and what caused this polarization, this division within the fanbase itself. This civil war I see in my comment section that I first started seeing after I posted my video on the second season. The poor reception of season 2. As I said in my last video, season 1 was carried by many things, but above them all is our director, Shingo Natsumi. He assembled an all-star freelancer animation team, granting them creative freedom to do what they wanted. The budget genuinely was nothing special, but their passion resulted in an explosion. If you want to know more about that, just check the previous video. But when news broke that Madhouse would not return for season 2, serious fans got nervous. Although most anime watchers had no idea what it took to create season 1, the devoted people who were following maybe even from the webcomic or manga knew that this was not a good sign, and those fears were confirmed when the production shifted into the hands of JC staff. A studio with a solid track record of competent work, but not one known for its kind of draw-dropping animation, but for comedies and slice of life shows. This genuinely could be a very good fit for One Punch Man if it could manage to get the fights to a decent standard. However, they were given very little time to prepare. JC staff had to step in late in the process, not only inheriting impossible expectations from season 1, but without the production pipeline, schedule, passion needed to meet those deadlines. But what they were given was the task of following up the most anticipated anime of the year and maybe the decade. The result was an anime that felt fundamentally different. The animation was flatter, choreography was stiffer, and even the comedic timing that JC are known for was weak here. Fights that should have been dynamic instead looked fairly static. Example, the tournament arc. Even if you could forgive the drop in visual quality, the same energy that made season 1 so special simply wasn't there. When we look at the changes between season 1 and 2, it's not hard to see where things started to flip. If we break down the staff list, the pattern is obvious. In season 1, most of the big named animators weren't tied down to Madhouse. They came in because they respected the director. He was the magnet that pulled in top freelancers from across the industry. But when Nasami left, so did those connections and those animators. Not because they had to, but because the reason they were there left. He wasn't leading the charge, and the fame that they all got from the success of season 1 made them very desired employees on other projects. That is the first major crack. Now, to be fair, not everything changed. Some genuinely massive and key roles stayed the same. Tomohiro Kazuki still handled the composition. Makoto Miyazaki returned to do the music, and Chiazaki Kobata returned as character designer and chief animation director. On paper, this should have helped maintain the consistency. The soundtrack still had some bangers, and Kubot's designs are technically the same as season 1, but that's not shown in the anime. The biggest issue was the execution. That's where it fell apart. Under a new director, Chikara Sakurai. There's no point in mentioning every single element where the anime fell short because it's clearly visible in the product. But let's be real, whoever decided to make Genos partly CG deserves a lifetime ban from anime production. It completely killed the sharp mechanical detail that made him impressive in season 1. So on one hand, the talent wasn't entirely gone. Some staff stayed. The music was still amazing. Jam Projects returned to do the opening, but without Natsume's leadership and anime connections, the soul of One Punch Man didn't carry over. This obviously hurt One Punch Man's brand. Just look at the perspective and audience perspective. A really large chunk of the audience in this moment realistically checked out. They waited 4 years and they were met with disappointment. I covered the anime's fall in more detail in this video up here if you want to check that out, as I won't be able to go into as much detail as I want on the topic here and now, as this is just one of the many wounds One Punch Man had to bear, and the second and most possibly severe are the issues residing within its manga. The redraws and slow pace of the manga. While the anime-only fans are mourning the drop in quality, manga readers were dealing with their entirely own frustrations. Yusuke Murata's artwork is legendary. No one can say otherwise. His spreads are breathtaking and his monster designs are intricate, and his fight scenes are practically animatics. But that perfection comes at a cost. Last video I mentioned Murata developed a habit of redrawing chapters, not just panels, but sometimes entire sequences. While the improved art was impressive, it meant the story's pace was slowed to a crawl. Readers would never be sure when the next chapter would appear, or whether the one they had just read that moment would be replaced days later with a revised version. It made it so a fan who was reading week to week would have no idea whether what they just read was canon. He wouldn't just redraw the harsh art and paneling, but often would revise the story itself. Now, one thing, it's unclear as to why. Whether it's because Murata is a perfectionist or because one requested the changes to the story. These changes did deviate from the original source, from the webcomic. So the normal response is to blame Murata for the change in story. But I would like to remind everyone watching this video that one's name is still on the manga as a writer. And with that comes the responsibility of the story itself. If it changes and the webcomic readers are disappointed with those changes in the manga, then one is the person to blame, not Murata. Although Murata might want to make changes to the story and make tweaks, one is the one signing off on those changes. There has been zero evidence that I have seen to suggest that one has fully handed over the story of the manga to Murata. So before you go off saying in the comments that he ruined One Punch Man, that in mind. However, this doesn't change the fact that there are changes in the manga and that there is consistent retcons. As a weekly reader now myself, it is infuriating reading through the entire ninja arc, for example. A section of story that has 3, at least, timelines that had so many moments that I would read the next chapter just to realize it had started from a different location at a previous chapter. So I would have to go back and read the last chapter, only to find that 2 chapters had been revised. This made it exceedingly difficult to discover what I was supposed to read. And of course, I can sympathize with anyone who that frustrates. But the question is now, how this affected the greater One Punch Man audience and reputation. This created a strange kind of tension within the fandom. On one hand, fans admired Murata's dedication to quality. I personally enjoy his spreads infinitely more than many other manga I've read. But on the other hand, the consistent start and stop rhythm that makes it difficult to stay invested in the story. For casual readers, it must be exhausting. For diehards, it sometimes felt like the manga was sinking in development and retcon hell, always being perfected, but never moving forward. It was at this point in the script where this thought crossed my mind. None of these issues actually affect the majority of manga readers. Now hear me out before you start yapping in the comments. If you're reading the physical volumes as they come out officially translated, you're never going to come across any of these issues. Those official volumes are going to have the perfected timeline. So the reader won't experience any of this. Hell, most people who read the One Punch Man manga aren't going to be affected by this. It's only us, the small minority of people, that have to put up with it because we read week to week. Probably the healthiest way of looking at it is that the on-run releases of the manga are like early access games. Sure, there might be things that you adore that get removed because they didn't pan out the way Murata 1 wanted. But unlike early access games, we know that One and Murata have a very good track record of actually delivering a premium product. So isn't it worth the wait? The tone shift away from the webcomic. The webcomic, rough as it looked, moved at a consistent pace over the past 10 years. Not a fast pace, I would remind you. One's only managed to get out 60 chapters in these 10 years. This almost exactly matches the pace of the manga. I saw a few comments saying that the manga had more releases, but that's not really true at all. Regardless, characters in webcomic develop naturally, and arcs reach their conclusion without redraws or delays. This is the story that comes straight from the source, from one's unfiltered and unburdened passion. Not changed to fit a formula, not trying to chase perfection. The manga lost many frustrated readers simply trying to enjoy the story due to this. And this leads to the issue of tone, perhaps the most divisive problem of all, as we move to the next type of fan, the webcomic OGs. The tone of the original webcomic was brilliant and messy. It goofed on shonen with cruel simplicity. Villains were terrifying until they weren't, and arcs ended really abruptly, like almost all the fights as well. Characters died in ways that were shocking and often anticlimactic. Played for laughs, but the humor came out not just in its gags, but in the sheer awkwardness and direct dialogue. Some of these OGs think that the manga adaptation shifted that balance. The story, for the most part, is still there, one-to-one, no pun intended, and in an attempt to match the writing, Murata made everything bigger. Think of it as like the Americanization of the webcomic. Think about a quaint commercial Japanese car, and when you bring that to America version, it's bigger. When you think about European McDonald's, there's a nice little burger and some chips, and then you bring it to America and it's bigger. And I'm not saying that's bad. I love the One Punch Man manga, but it's certainly different. A lack of excitement for the new anime. All of this leads us to today, where the future of One Punch Man feels strangely uncertain. Season 3 has been announced, but no concrete details are scarce. The trailers we've seen so far, if you can even call them trailers, are faithful-ish to Murata's manga designs. But, as I said, ish. They lack something. They feel different. But they are an improvement from Season 2. If you want to understand how shaky One Punch Man's position is right now, you only need to look at the conventions this year. On the surface, it looks like the celebration at Anime Expo 2025 in Los Angeles. They, even broke a Guinness World Record. Over 1,000 fans performed Saitama's Serious Punch in unison. The Japanese and English cast showed up, and Jam Projects made their return, and even one himself sent a special message thanking fans on paper. But this wasn't necessarily for the third season, it was for the 10th anniversary. And here's another problem. There wasn't a trailer, and there was no confirmed release date. No real production details. After waiting years, fans were expecting at least some answers, and they were left with funny meme epic times at the expo. While fun, I guess, they didn't actually tell us, the audience, anything about season 3. It was the same story at Anime New York City. Later that summer, Jam Projects performed live there. The panel hyped up the upcoming season a little bit, and there was a behind-the-scenes crew preview. Nothing to do with the product itself, but to do with the crew. But again, no solid information, no clear staff list, no animation to prove the series is going on the right track. Even at Anime Japan in Tokyo, One Punch Man barely had a presence. Just a booth under Bandai Namco with some figures and posters and a cutout that you could take your picture with. For a series that once dominated the conversation, that kind of quiet promotion doesn't feel encouraging. The most concrete thing we got was the announcement of season 3 is targeting in October 2025, something we already knew. And that brings us back to our 3 groups. The truth is, all 3 groups are right in their own way. The manga purists are right that the tone has shifted. The manga loyalists are right that the perfection has slowed the pace of the story to a crawl. The anime fans are right that the adaptation quality dropped off a cliff. None of these issues exist in isolation. They feed into one another. When the manga stalls, so does the anime. The manga moves at the exact same pace as the webcomic. That's not a coincidence. That's why One Punch Man feels stuck, at least to me. Not because the story has no future, because the foundation is fractured. Each group of fans wants something different. And instead of uniting under a shared love for the character and the world and the story, this division to me only seems to be growing louder. So who's to blame? Is it one for letting the manga deviate? Is it Murata for chasing perfection and distancing itself from the original work? Was it JC for fumbling the anime? Or is it just the curse of impossible expectations? A story caught between greatness and disappointment, hope and frustration, and a rise and a fall. The then and now. So what of the future? You actually managed to watch the entire video. That's, I really appreciate that. Thanks a million. I hope to have the future by next week, but I'm not sure. Mainly because I haven't even started the script for it. And I actually kind of struggled with this one. So let me know if I missed anything. I didn't go too much into production of season 2 because I covered that in a previous video. But, you know, I just would love any feedback any of you guys have. So stick around. Hopefully, I'll see you next week.